When my mother-in-law handed me a wrapped gift box at the annual military officers' ball, I thought it was another one of her passive-aggressive insults. But when I opened it under the crystal chandeliers, right in front of my husband's entire chain of command, I found a set of pre-signed divorce papers. My husband didn't stop her. He stood there holding his phone, recording my public humiliation for their family group chat. Everyone in that grand ballroom expected me to burst into tears, drop to my knees, or run out in shame. Instead, I picked up a pen, signed every single page with a calm smile, and handed them back to her. What my mother-in-law and husband completely forgot was that I wasn't just a military spouse they could step on. I was the senior base logistics inspector who held the deeds, the security clearances, and the records to every lie they'd built their lives on. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Captain Julia Hall. I'm 31 years old, and for 4 years, I mistakenly believed that patience could earn me the respect of a woman who was determined to hate me. I'm an active-duty military logistics officer, a career built on precision, discipline, and seeing through chaos. Yet, inside my own home, I let my guard down. I married Mark, believing we were a team, but from the day I said I do, his mother, Evelyn, made it her personal mission to ensure I felt like an unwelcome guest in my own life. Evelyn was the kind of woman who wore passive aggression like expensive perfume. To the rest of the world, she was a refined military matriarch, but to me, she was a quiet nightmare. She constantly belittled my background, dropped hints about Mark's wealthy ex-fiancé, and treated me like a low-class outsider who was simply leeching off her son's officer status. Mark never defended me. Instead, he treated her cruelty as harmless motherly concern, expecting me to smile, nod, and swallow my pride. I endured 4 years of subtle emotional abuse, believing that if I just kept serving my country and supporting my husband, things would change. I had no idea that while I was honoring my vows, Evelyn and Mark were actively planning my complete destruction. The week leading up to the annual Officers' Gala should have been a time of celebration, but the atmosphere in our home was suffocating. Evelyn had insisted on attending as Mark's guest of honor, completely overriding my presence as his wife. She made grand, sweeping statements about a major life update she couldn't wait to share with everyone, eyeing me with a smug, knowing smirk every time the ball was mentioned. Mark acted distant, barely meeting my eyes and slipping away into his home office for hours at a time. My instincts, honed by years of military oversight, told me something was wrong. Late one evening, while Mark was in the shower, I noticed his laptop open on his desk. What I found made my blood run cold. There were encrypted email threads between Mark, Evelyn, and a civilian real estate lawyer. They were discussing strategies to liquidate and transfer the title of the Carmel by the Sea home, a property I had purchased entirely on my own prior to our marriage using my family trust. They were quietly attempting to rebrand my pre-marital asset as joint property to sell off. Instead of confronting them right then and blowing my cover, I kept my composure. I quietly downloaded every email, audited our joint banking portfolio, and pulled our official military housing allowance records. I discovered they had already started shuffling funds around. They thought I was just a naive military spouse blinded by love, but they forgot one crucial detail. I was a logistics inspector trained to track hidden paper trails. The night of the officers' ball arrived, and the grand ballroom was spectacular. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over high-ranking commanders, distinguished civilian guests, and officers standing tall in their formal dress uniforms. Live orchestral music echoed through the hall as people laughed, clinked glasses, and celebrated the unit's achievements. I sat at our reserved table wearing a classic dark evening gown, maintaining a polite, professional smile despite the thick tension radiating from Mark and Evelyn. During the main toast, as conversations buzzed across the crowded room, Evelyn suddenly stood up and tapped her champagne glass with a silver spoon. She cleared her throat loudly, intentionally drawing the attention of the surrounding tables, including Mark's commanding officer and his wife. With a dramatic flourish, she announced that she had brought a special birthday and milestone surprise for her daughter-in-law. She pulled a beautifully wrapped, silk-ribboned box from her designer purse and slid it across the white tablecloth toward me. Everyone at the table paused, watching expectantly. Beside her, Mark pulled out his smartphone, aiming the camera directly at my face to record my reaction. I untied the ribbon and opened the lid. Inside lay no jewelry or sweet gesture, but a neat stack of pre-signed divorce documents paired with a formal 30-day eviction notice for my own house. Evelyn's voice cut through the silence, dripping with malicious triumph. "It's time you give Mark back his freedom, Julia. We all know you never belonged in this family." The silence around our table was suffocating. Evelyn watched me with a cruel, triumphant grin, while Mark kept his phone camera focused on my face, waiting for the tears, the screaming, or the desperate pleading. They expected me to collapse under the weight of public humiliation in front of the base's highest-ranking leadership. Instead, I let out a slow, deliberate breath, picked up the silver pen resting beside my plate, and calmly signed every single page of the divorce papers. The smug satisfaction on Evelyn's face faltered slightly as I slid the signed documents back across the crisp white linen. I looked her dead in the eye, maintaining the absolute composure of an officer under fire. "Thank you, Evelyn," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the immediate silence. "You've actually saved me the trouble of filing these myself." Before she could process my words, I opened my clutch and pulled out a manila folder of my own. 3 days ago, while auditing our accounts, I hadn't just found their emails. I had uncovered 3 years of systemic financial fraud. Mark's eyes widened as I laid out the certified banking statements. Not only had Evelyn been illegally using base privileges and military discounts under Mark's officer rank, but the luxurious Carmel-by-the-Sea home they tried to steal, along with the luxury vehicles parked in the driveway, didn't belong to Mark at all. They were bought and paid for strictly through my premarital family trust. They hadn't just backed me into a corner, they had handed me complete legal ammunition. I stood up, holding the folder, and turned slightly so my voice would reach Mark's commanding officer sitting at the adjacent table. "Colonel," I said calmly, "since my husband and his mother are so eager to handle personal matters in full view of the unit, there are a few official discrepancies you should be aware of." Mark's face drained of color as he scrambled to turn off his phone camera. I opened the folder and presented the certified documentation. For the past 18 months, Mark has been utilizing his government travel charge card to fund his mother's personal luxury vacations, spa retreats, and high-end shopping sprees, falsifying them as official military travel expenses. A collective murmur swept through the surrounding tables. The colonel's eyes narrowed into sharp, dangerous slits as he leaned forward. "Furthermore," I continued, looking directly at Evelyn, whose smug expression was rapidly decaying into pure horror. "They attempted to illegally transfer the title of my sole premarital property into a shell corporation under Evelyn's name. But what Mark failed to realize when he drafted his financial demands is that his mother's lavish lifestyle was entirely built on high-interest debt racked up under his name alone. By signing these divorce papers tonight, I am officially severing my income from his estate. Every single cent of that accumulated debt, along with the full burden of his military audit, now belongs strictly to him." Mark sat frozen, realizing that in his rush to ruin me, he had stripped away the only financial shield standing between his family and complete ruin. The atmosphere in the grand ballroom shifted instantly. Colonel Vance stood up, his face grim, and signaled to 2 military police officers waiting near the entrance. Within seconds, Mark was escorted away from the table, facing an immediate official investigation for financial misconduct, misuse of government property, and conduct unbecoming an officer. His career, built on arrogance and fake prestige, crumbled in a single night. Evelyn sat paralyzed in her chair, the color completely gone from her face. As the surrounding officers and their spouses turned away with sharp looks of disgust, the reality of what she had done finally crashed down on her. Without my family trust funding their lifestyle, there was no safety net left. Every luxury car payment, every maxed-out credit card, and every back tax obligation fell entirely on her and her disgraced son. I leaned down close to her ear, keeping my voice steady and cold. "You gave me a 30-day eviction notice for my own house," I whispered. "So I suggest you start packing tonight. My legal team will be at the property by 800 tomorrow morning with a court order to reclaim my keys and escort you off my land." Evelyn's mouth worked silently, tears finally breaking through her heavy makeup as she realized her relentless greed had stripped her son of his rank, his income, and his future. 6 months later, my life looks entirely different. I received a promotion to senior logistics specialist and relocated to a quiet coastal command near Carmel by the Sea, where I now spend my evenings walking along the beach in absolute peace. Mark was demoted, issued an administrative discharge from the military, and ordered to make full restitution for his financial misconduct. He and Evelyn were forced to sell off their personal belongings to cover their staggering debts, eventually moving into a cramped, rented apartment far from the high society circles they once craved. Standing up to them wasn't just about protecting my assets, it was about honoring my self-respect and refusing to let toxic people rewrite my worth. Now, I'm curious about your thoughts. What would you have done if you were handed those divorce papers at the ball? Have you ever had to deal with an overbearing or toxic family member? Comment the city you're watching from down below. I read every single response, and I'd love to hear your story.